Great. Once again, we'll look at Power BI today. Steve's going to take you through this. Great, to see Steve here today. He's a bit of a Power BI guru. Not a bit, actually, he's very good at Power BI. And he's worked with very soft clients as well, which is in the large public sector, mining. So anything Power BI related, Steve is a good person to ask the question. So I'll hand you over to Steve, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the session.
Thanks, Billy. Okay, welcome all. As Billy said, my name's Steve. I don't call myself a guru because Power BI is pretty new and there's lots and lots of stuff to know, but there's certainly parts of it that I'm pretty good with, which is why I'm here. So what we're going to do today is fix my clicker. Lovely. All right. So what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what business intelligence is, a bit of background. The theme of the whole day is workplace of the future, so I'll talk a little bit about what that is and how things like Power BI or business intelligence in general can help with that. We'll do a bit of an overview of Power BI itself, the tool, the product, and then towards the end we'll have a bit of a look at what the future of business intelligence might hold. Obviously, different ball goes in there, but there's some things that are already sort of starting to take shape. Okay, so BI, what does it all mean? So business intelligence, I'll probably call it BI from now on. We're all collecting lots and lots of data from all over the place. We've got all sorts of systems. We've got systems, local systems. We've got databases. We've got Excel spreadsheets. We've got dumps from SAP. We've got cloud stuff. All sorts of data we're collecting all the time. But how many organisations are actually using that to drive decisions? I guess is the question. When we're making organisational decisions, when decision makers are making those decisions, it tends to be based on things like experience. Obviously, a bit of gut feel, which helps, relies on experience. We might call in some consultants, we might do some research, might have some roundtables, do some brainstorming, all that sort of stuff. And we're certainly not saying get rid of that, because that's the important part of managing and leading organisations. What we're saying is, what are we adding to that? The data itself, right? Some data-driven decision-making processes, and that's what business intelligence is all about. So BI is the process of transforming collected data, which is out there, but it's kind of inaccessible, into actionable business insights. That's what it's really all about. Good BI tools provide us with up-to-the-minute, easy to digest insights about the organisation's current position, its past, as well as sort of future trends and that sort of stuff where we're going. It's all been broken. Well, kind of. Sort of talking about the workplace here, I guess. It's been around 18 months since COVID reared its ugly head and forced some drastic changes in our workplace habits and methods. In many ways, some of the aspects of the old way of working have been broken. And organisations have been forced to embrace more of a, obviously, people work from home because of COVID, but also that's actually brought about a gradual shift in a work from anywhere sort of perspective, I guess, from organisations. To do that, staff need to now move from a task-based focus, like a go for this, go for that, to much more of an outcome or objective-based focus. Right? So that's something that the organisation needs to kind of do. The good news, I guess, in terms of data and business intelligence is that that's one sort of aspect of the organisation that is fairly stable and has the potential to help. And your BI practices and methods you put in place also will still be available to people regardless of where they work. Okay, so that's the good news, I guess. How can a BI system help with that sort of workplace of the future? Well, for a start, business intelligence can provide that outcome performance-based feedback that your outcome-focused staff will need, right? So they're getting that feedback, up-to-date feedback on their area of expertise, what their outcomes are, and they can see what's happening and the effects of what they're doing immediately, as can managers and supervisors and that sort of stuff as well. So they're getting that feedback immediately. Business intelligence dashboards and reports can be easily and securely accessed from anywhere. So when you're in a work from anywhere culture, that's a pretty important thing. And it can save time and frustration by keeping people updated, and it provides kind of a solid anchor that staff can rely on when people are all over the place, and gives that consistency and guidance, I guess, as well. So there are a number of ways BI and BI systems can assist in that sort of workplace in the future. Why aren't we all doing it? Well, there are lots of systems out there, and some of you may be using some of those systems, and they deliver various parts, I guess, of the requirements of business intelligence. Some of them are a bit older, they're legacy, they don't keep up with the changes very well, or they're difficult to change or can't change them. So they're ones that eventually will slide by the wayside, I guess, as time goes on. Most, however, are very expensive, right? We're talking about older systems, legacy systems, quite expensive to implement. And then you've got to hire expensive consultants and specialists to actually come in and set it up for you. And every time you want to change, you've then got to go to them, and then they've got to change it and so on. This, I guess, is where Microsoft specialises in sort of, I guess you can almost say, disrupting the technology. All right, they've done it in a lot of areas so far, and now they're doing it in business intelligence with Microsoft Power BI. What they've really done is created a product that brings that business intelligence capability down to a point where it's relatively cheap, it's relatively easy to set up, and it's also pretty intuitive to use because we're all used to Microsoft interface. It means that smaller organisations or parts of organisations, sections and that sort of stuff, right down to small business, can now afford to actually do their own BI and can get access to their data and make some useful insights. And that's why you'll probably hear a lot more talk about Power BI over the years to come, and it's really just taking off because it's something really the average organisation hasn't had access to until now. In fact, SiteTub, which are kind of like a choosy for software, I guess, where they do reviews of software and that sort of stuff, did a 2021 scorecard. They looked at all of these different factors here in terms of business intelligence software, and that's their scoring. You can see Power BI came out pretty well ahead, right? Right-hand, left-hand side, right down to poor old SAP. At the end, for those who use SAP, you're probably well aware of its limitations. And that's not to say Power BI, scored brilliantly across the board. There are certainly some areas there that Power BI doesn't do all that well yet, and they need to get better at it. But then it's Microsoft, and Microsoft are going to continue developing the product, and they're going to pour a lot of money into it, and it changes every month basically. Right? They're always adding limits to it, so it's constantly on the go. So it's a good sign. What does a good BI system need to be able to do for us? Well, first of all, we have to be able to integrate lots of different sources of data. All right, it's not just enough to be able to grab hold of one database of information or one Excel file or a couple of Excel files and produce a dashboard of some sort. You've got lots of different parts of the organisation that have lots of different, data, sometimes data silos, but sets of data, and you want to integrate those into one sort of combined report that the whole organisation can look at. It also has to be able to transform data storage structures, which are quite complex, into a simpler model for data analysis. I'll talk about that more in a minute. It's a little bit techy, but it's not too bad. I think most of you can handle it. You want to be able to enhance the data analysis model with additional calculations and creating performance measures, which can then be used to actually put your dashboards together. Obviously, you want to be able to easily create reports that look good, are easy to interpret and make sense. You want to make sure that people in your organisation can access the reports, obviously, and all the dashboards and that sort of stuff. So you need secure sharing, and you need it to integrate with your internal systems as well, so it's nice and easy to get access to. And ideally, it'd be good if it allowed report consumers to actually serve themselves to some extent with the interface. Interact with it so that every time they want a different bit of information, they don't have to go run into the designers to update that information. Right, so they're the sort of things that a good BI system, should be able to do. There are certainly others we'd like it to do as well. So let's have a look at Microsoft Power BI now, which is sort of the focus of the session. How does Power BI sort of do all that? All right, so what I've done is I've broken it down to more of a diagrammatic format, right? So it makes a little bit more sense, hopefully. Okay, so in the Microsoft Power BI infrastructure, there's a product called Power Query, which is what we use for connecting to data sources, multiple data sources, bringing them all together and producing that nice homogeneous model. Power Query has been around for a while. It started as an add-in for Microsoft Excel. It's still in Microsoft Excel, so you can connect to data sources and and create a nice model, and then use things like Power Pivot within Excel, right, in Power Query, and it's in Power BI as well. So that's the tool that we use to do that transformation stuff and bring the data together into a nice model. Once we've got that nice model, we then can move into Power BI Desktop, which is the main Power BI tool, I guess, that sits on your machine. And we can use a language called DAX, which I'll talk briefly about later, but you know, this is a techie day. But we can use that to add extra information, add calculations, add extra tables, add performance measures and that sort of stuff, so that we can use them in the dashboards later on. Obviously, within Power BI Desktop, we also can create reports, right, that make sense. They're based on that model we created. And then finally, not finally actually, sorry, this is second to final, we want to be able to serve that out and share it in a secure way with our organisation. In the Power BI infrastructure, what that means is we're using the Power BI service. That's Microsoft's sort of cloud offering, and you go into the Power BI Desktop, publish button, and it pushes it up to the web, and then people can access it from there. And as I said before, the Power BI also lets your report consumers to some extent interact with the reports and then serve themselves depending on the sort of level of skill they've got in doing that. So that's kind of a diagrammatic representation of the Power BI infrastructure. I'm just going to go through each of those in a little bit more detail, and I'm going to do some demos as we go. I'll show you sort of how we do some reports. I'll show you some integration stuff. So we'll actually, it's not all slides, don't worry, we'll do some demonstrations as well. All right, so let's break it down a bit. I talked earlier on about storage versus analysis, right? When database designers store databases in the back end for whatever systems you're using, from large enterprise systems right down to small internal systems and that sort of stuff, they use a process called normalization. And what that basically means is they want the database data to take up as little space as possible, which in the old days, when disk space was expensive and so was memory, that was pretty important to do. These days, I guess you could say it's not as important, but we still practice good design. What that basically means is we want to pull out things like repetition in data. We want to pull out calculations. For instance, if you have some data and it's got the unit price of a product and it's got the quantity of the product, you don't need to store the total price as well, right? You can strip that out and we can add in the total price later on. And for us, that's what that DAX thing does, right? We can add those calculations in on the front end. So what you often find is your data storage looks a bit like that. Horrible, isn't it? That's actually not a terrible, that's not a terribly complex example. Real database systems can often have hundreds of tables and lots of interconnected relationships. So each of those squares is a table of data, and each of the lines is a relationship between the data, which is great for storing data, but horrible for analysing it, right? When we analyse data, we want it in a much nicer, neater little package. Right? We often call this a star structure or a star schema, I guess, because it kind of looks a bit like a star. You've got this table in the middle and the other ones sort of shoot out from the outsides. We use data analysis terminology there. We use fact and dimension tables. The fact table tends to be the one that holds the data, right? It's the sort of low level. And the dimension tables, I guess you can think of them as metadata about the fact information. For example, in the demonstrations I'm going to use, where we're pretending we're a training organisation, a fictitious one, it's not actually this one, but basically our main table is our course schedule, right? So every row in that table is a scheduled course with a date and information about that scheduled course. In terms of the data, it's got the gross margin for that particular course, in other words, how much do we make on the course. It's got how many participants were in that course. We also keep consultant scores in that course as well. So that's kind of the data aspect. They're the things we want to analyse, really, those sorts of things. In terms of the dimension tables, we've got things like the categories for the course. Is it a human resource course? Is it a train the trainer course? Is it a Microsoft type course or whatever? We've got consultants, right? So the consultant that ran the course, right, is also in a separate table. We've got venues. The venues, of course, we run at. So you can see that this is the details of the course and the data, and around the outside we've got these things called dimension tables that give us some more detailed information about who ran the course, where it was run, and that sort of stuff. And we often want to sort of aggregate up in reports on those things. I might want to have a look at course categories, a list of course categories, and next to that I want to see, okay, what's the total, let's say the total participants we had against each course category. over a period of years, for instance. So that's kind of how we use that model. So we need to get things from that data storage, which is good for storage, but horrible for analysis, and we need to get into this sort of form. Right, so that's one of the things that Power Query, the add-in, I guess, or the tool that comes with Power BI can do for us. Okay, so integrating and transforming multiple data sources using Power Query. We've all got lots of data sources in our organisations. Here's a sample of the types of data we have. Obviously, there's lots of subsets to those, from financial management, employee management, HR systems, operations management, customer databases, and all that sort of stuff. Right? We've got lots of different data sources. And some of them come in different forms too. Some of them might be large ERP systems, some of them might be a cloud-based CRM system, and we might have some spreadsheets as well thrown in there for measure. So let's imagine I've got, say, 5 data sources I want to bring together. I've got a financial management system. That's what it looks like, right? In terms of storage. I've got a customer management system. That's what that one looks like storage-wise. I've got an operations management system. I want to bring some data in. And we don't have to grab all the data from these things. Just be a subset, but still, that's basically what I'm looking at. I might have a human resource system and some big old legacy system that doesn't really integrate well or doesn't play well with others. So I've got to do a dump out into a CSV, comma separated value sort of file, the old style stuff, and I'm going to integrate that somehow as well. And I might do my budgeting in Excel. All right, so there's 5 data sources. What we really need to be able to do is integrate those, bring them all together, and somehow, by the magic of computers and technology and stuff, create something that looks a bit like that. And that's what we can actually base our reports on. And that's what Power Query does. So in terms of how you can do that, you could go out, you could hire some expensive, or if you've got them, great, use a specialised database team. They'd be experts in that whole normalisation thing and the big mess that we saw earlier on, structured query language, create a data warehouse, which you might have heard of before, which basically uses SQL to bring all that stuff into one sort of place in the reports based on. And that's quite possible, and basically that's often how it's done. Right? And then they've got to keep that up to date as well, with data refreshes. Or you can train up a semi-technical person. I'm not saying they don't need to be technical at all, they've got to have some technical ability, but they don't have to be an expert in something like Power Query. It's relatively easy to use because it uses Microsoft Ribbons interface, and most people are used to that. You don't need advanced programming skills to use it, but if you've got them, you can use those as well. You can get deeper into it. It creates and automates the transformation steps, and when data changes, it's a one-push button, all right? And it just updates the data and refreshes all your visuals based on the new data. So let's have a quick look at the Power Query interface. I'm not going to teach you how to use it, but just to show you, this is what Power Query looks like. If you're in Excel and you go to the data tab and you hit import data, this is what you get as well. It can be quite scary the first time you see it. Essentially, we connect to the data sources over there. Right? So that's our external data sources, and Power Query can connect to lots of different data sources these days, and lots of them are built in. We use the button bars at the top, or the ribbons, to transform the tables and add transformation steps. So these steps, basically each step will perform a transformation on that table or our data to change it in some way. And there's an example where we've used a merge query thing, and that's the merge query step that ends up in your transformation area. They're automated, right? So once you've set up those transformation steps the first time, you don't need to keep going back to them. The system will remember those, and then next time you do a refresh, it just applies the same steps to the same data. Once you finish with that, you press the magic load into the model button, and it loads into Power BI into that nice model we saw earlier on, and then you can start creating your reports. Power BI desktop, if your data changes, it's pretty easy. You go into the Power BI desktop application, I'll show you this in a minute, hit the refresh button, that goes out, reconnects to all the sources, pulls them all through the transformations again, updates the model behind the scenes here, and then updates all the visuals and reports as well, right, from one press. So pretty easy to do. So that's that first step, I guess, which is the integrating step. So we've got Power Query that helps with that. Obviously, I'm not trying to teach you how to use it here, just giving you an overview of what's there, what tools are there. Second step is to use this thing called DAX, which is a programming language basically, to add to our model. So our base model is sort of the grey ones here, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What we want to add in using this DAX language is things like calculations, we stripped out earlier on. Right? So if we've got unit price and we've got quantity, we want to work out the total price, we can use this DAX language. And it's I'll show you in a minute, it's basically like Excel in a way. And what we're really doing generally is adding extra columns to tables, just as if you did it in Excel and you created a formula that added an extra column to a table in Excel. So similar concept. We can also add entirely new tables, right? One of the things that's useful in analysis is having a thing called a calendar table. That allows us to do time-based intelligence, month on month and year to date and all that sort of stuff, and timelines and all that sort of stuff. Right? May not be part of our original data source, so we may have to create it completely using this language thing. And also we can create these things called performance measures, right? So whereas if we add particular columns to a table, such as gross margin, we want to calculate that, for instance, they sit with that table. Measures are different. They stand back and they can use the whole model. They can grab that bit from there and that bit from there and divide that by that and then check based on this whether it should do that or that and then provide us with an outcome. All right, so they're a bit more complex, but they give us a lot more ability to get access to the whole model. So that's what this DAX thing does. For those who are interested, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions. It's actually been around for about 12 years. It was part of SQL Server Analysis Services originally, but since Power BI has come along, Microsoft have developed it a lot more. It's their own language. It's very Excel-like, right? So it's function-based, just like Excel if you've ever used Excel functions. And you can use it, like I said, to calculate new columns and tables, create whole new tables, or create these things called measures. And for those who are suckers for punishment, there's an example of DAX there, right? That's the month-on-month, if you want to do a month-on-month performance measure. Don't need to understand that. If you want to know about that, come and see me. I'll put you on a course and teach you how it works. All right. We now want to be able to create reports. So we've got this nice model thing. It's got some tables, and we call them fact and dimension tables, so we kind of get a feel for what they mean. And now we want to create a report. Right. Oh, look, demo time. Now you can relax, stop listening to me talk, and I'll give you a bit of a demo of how easy it is to put some report stuff together in Power BI. All right. Swap the camera across here so the people online can see my beautiful face. All right, let's take a look. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up Power BI desktop. Here it is here. Power BI desktop is the main tool we use for creating the reports essentially and playing with the model in the front end. All right, Power Query is sort of the back end grabbing the data, and this is for creating the reports. So, as I said, I'm just going to put a few reports together, just a few visuals together, just to show you that it's not super difficult. We basically use this interface over here on the right-hand side. We choose the visual we want, and then we choose the fields from our model that we want to stick into it. So let's say I wanted a clustered column chart. All right, just click on that, puts this little placeholder in place. And I want to have a look at the gross margin by region. All right. So what I do is I get into the model and I go, okay, these are all my tables. There's the dim tables. They're the metadata, if you like. And I've got a dim regions, which has my regions. So I'm going to stick region in there. All right. Can't see anything yet because I haven't got any data yet. In terms of what I want to plot against the region, gross margin. Because that's data, it's most likely to sit in my fact table. So I go down to my fact table, fact schedule. I tick gross margin, and there we go. Now, it's a little bit larger, so I'll just move it across here. So there we go. We've got an instant visual of our gross margin by region. Pretty easy to do. I could also want to see how that breaks down by year. All right, so we've got 4 regions: Central East, Southeast, Northwest, and Northeast. How does that break down by the years? Well, I go to that calendar table I told you about. And I'll grab the year information. It's just a drag and drop interface. If you've ever used pivot tables in Excel, pretty similar. I drag that up to the little drop zone there for legend, and now I've got it broken down by years as well. Good, all right. I might want to change that. I might think, well, that's all right, but I'd like to see maybe a stacked bar chart instead. Pretty easy. I just select the visual over here, come over to the visuals pane here and choose stacked bar chart. Now I've got a stacked bar chart instead. So putting a basic visual together, pretty straightforward. Let's say I want a line chart. All right, so click away, click on line chart, sort of puts a little spot down there ready for the line chart. And let's do a bit of a line chart over the months of the gross margin again. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to choose, let's say month names, and then I'll choose the gross margin to plot there. Right, there we go. Okay. That doesn't work very well. What it's done is it's sorted by the quantity rather than the actual months. So what I'll do is I'll change the field out there so it makes a little bit more sense. Okay, that makes a little more sense. Okay, so now we've got a line chart there of our months over time. So there's our gross margin over time, and that's basically right across the 3 years of data that we've got there. All right, so I could make that a bit longer, or I could narrow that down and choose a specific year. I can put in there things called slices, similar to Excel if you've used pivot tables again, and a slice will allow me then to narrow down, say, the year. I could throw a year in the slicer there. Now, for some reason with years, it tends to throw it in as a bit of a slider, so I'm going to change it to a list. And there we go, there's a little slicer with my years. And now I can choose 2020, 2019, 2018, and that slices the data and filters the data. So another thing we can do. Thing called cards. Cards allow us to just view a single bit of data or a single value. So I'll throw a card in there. Yeah, there's a card, and I'll just show the gross margin. So once again, come across to my fields, go down to my table. It's got my gross margin in it. Tick that one, and now we've got the gross margin there. 1 million. All right. Doesn't look that. Looks a little bit like I'd like a few more decimal places in there. I can go to format the card, go up to the data label and say, okay, well, let's use a couple of extra decimal places in there. Or I can also choose to display it as thousands instead of millions and that sort of stuff. So you can see, hopefully from that, visuals pretty easy to put together. The basic ones, once you've got the model in place, it's really a drag and drop interface, right? I'll do one more. I'll do a gauge. We'll do something a little bit more fancy with this one. So we'll throw a gauge in here. Let's say I want a gauge that shows me, let's say, average participants on my courses. Right. So I've got to tell it what to put in here. So I'm just going to say I'll put participants in, and let's make that an average. All right. So average participants, and then I'll just do a little bit of formatting this gauge to tell it what to use the minimum, maximum values. Let's say use 12 as the maximum. And we can even stick a target in there. Let's say a target of 8.5. Right, so this is average participants on a course. So if we've got a particular course at the moment, I'm in the year 2018. You can see on the slicer, and that's the average number of participants that we've had in 2018. One of the nice things is I can narrow that down. I can go and choose, say, the Central East region over here, and the visuals themselves interact. I'll talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about that self-service thing, but you can kind of see that as I choose the different regions here, that actually changes all of the other visuals and shows me different aspects of the data. And I can get fancy with this. I can come in here and I can say, okay, well, let's do a little bit of a traffic light thing for the gauge. What I'm going to do is for the data colors, instead of blue, I'm going to use a little conditional formatting tool. All right, and those who've used Excel have probably seen conditional formatting there. Go to the color scale, choose some rules, and I can say average of participants, and then I can say things like, okay, if it's greater than 0 and less than, let's say, 8, then let's make that a red color. That's not great, a lot better than that. Add a new rule, let's say it's greater than 8. But less than 8.5. We'll make that some sort of a close enough to yellow. And throw another one in there. If it's greater than 8.5, then let's make it some sort of a green colour. pretty straightforward. Obviously, you need to learn how to use it, but it's not rocket science. I can do that. If I come to 2020 now, I can see that all up, I'm 9.9. All right, so the whole thing's green. I can check my individual regions, Central East. Okay, they're doing well. That's Sydney and Melbourne, so no surprises there. Actually, that's mainly Sydney, I guess. Southeast would be Melbourne and Victoria, so they're doing pretty well. Northwest, that's us. Yeah, not bad. Northeast, not so well. Okay, so because they're below the mark, they've come up as red. So we can do all sorts of sort of formatting of colours and that sort of stuff to give us that sort of traffic light thing. That's just one example, but that'll probably do for now. But it hopefully gives you a bit of an idea about the fact once you've got that model in place, creating the reports not that difficult. All right, certainly you can get more techie about it. Here's an overview of of a sort of typical report you might put in place. Slices down the bottom look a little bit different, all right? But, it's the same principle, it's just formatted slightly differently.
Steve, where does the source data have to sit in a data warehouse?
No. The source data stays where the source data stays, all right? We don't touch the source data, we just connect to it when we're doing that transformation stuff. And then what it does is it transforms the data, right, into that nice model, and the model sits in here. Basically, there's a file. Excel has an XLSX file. Word has a docx file. Power BI has a PBIX file. And the data actually sits in there, the model data, right, which is usually a subset of all your data. You don't want all your data sitting in there, but the model data actually sits in this PBIX file along with the reports. And you can have a look at it. There it is there. If I go here, that's my data view, and I can have a look at the model itself, and I can actually have a look at all the data that's been stored inside there. You might think, oh, that's terrible. All that data inside a file. That's what this thing's designed for. It's designed to store big data, and it's okay at doing it. It's very good at compressing it. It's very quick at grabbing the data out. And it's very quick at creating reports as well. It's designed for that. Right, so it handles large data very well. And as I said, we don't normally grab all the data from our data sources. We just grab bits and pieces of it as we need it, right, to create that sort of homogeneous model. But yeah, that's basically where it sits.
If you have a simplified solution, an integrated solution across the organisation,
yeah,
HR, finance, all sorts of things, then that will interface with a.
That's right. We use something like Power Query to connect to those data sources, pull in the bits we need, transform them into that model, and then that model is what gets stored in the PBIX file. All right, and then the reports are based on that. All right, look, I'm going to keep going. I will answer other questions at the end, but we need to keep moving, otherwise we won't get through stuff. So, if you want to learn how to do all that stuff in more detail, obviously there's courses for that, but you can see hopefully how we can do that whole, creating a report once you've got that model. It's a drag, not it's not right. All right. The other thing we want to be able to do is allow secure sharing and integration with our internal systems. Right? For Power BI and the Power BI infrastructure, we use the Power BI service. Right? So here's our local machine. Right? We've got the Power BI desktop, that tool I showed you. We've got that's our interface I was just playing with there and creating reports. We hit a publish button. That then publishes up to our Power BI service, and we have our own workspaces on there. It's all workspace based. Basically sets the whole file up with all the data and all the definitions of all our visuals and reports and that sort of stuff. And then that's basically where your users and your consumers will actually access the report from. Right? So it's all secure. Obviously, they've got to have Microsoft logins and that sort of stuff to get onto there. Your organisation controls who gets what access to which workspaces. And then once they're up there, they can play around with it and do that self-service that you talked about as well.
Is that a real-time data, or do you have to trigger a refresh?
You have to trigger a refresh. There's a couple of ways to do it. I can talk about it more later on. I mean, this is kind of the manual way of doing it, where you update the data in here using the refresh button in the local machine, and then you republish it up. There are server versions, all right? So the server has the connection to the data sources, and it's set up to automatically refresh on a regular basis. You can do live, but live has a whole bunch of other problems associated with it, as you can imagine. So caching is a better way to do it. You can set up data every hour, every half hour, Right.
If I was using Teams, do I have to refresh? Do I refresh at my machine? Update the shared.
If you any of those things, basically, if you refresh at the machine level, you need to republish it and overwrites the report. From there, everything that everywhere you share the report from here will then update. And as I said, often it's set up on a server anyway to automatically update, so you don't have to look at it necessarily. In terms of integration, like I mentioned, we've got a number of ways to integrate with that in terms of once you've got your report up in the Power BI service, how do your users and consumers actually get to access it? Well, you can access it directly if you want. You can give them the link to that Power BI service in the workspace. They can go on there, log in with their ID, and then they get access right there. There are other ways to do it though, so it's integrated with your internal systems, right? We can create these things called apps. An app's kind of a cut down interface for a report, and it looks a lot nicer and it gets rid of some of the extraneous information that if you're accessing the Power BI service directly, you can get confused by. Teams, you can stick it in Teams, so you can stick it in a team space and discuss it and act on it and that sort of stuff. SharePoint, you can stick it on a SharePoint page and people can access using SharePoint pages. Even if you've got an intranet site, you can even put in an intranet site. Right? And that's fully interactive. That isn't just a snapshot of the report. All the interactions, all the self-service stuff you can do up on the Power BI service in any of those or from any of those interfaces. All right, very quickly, let's have a look at that. So I've got, there we go. All right, so this is the Power BI service. So what I've done is I've pushed that file I showed you earlier, we were working on the demo stuff, up to the Power BI service. You can see here, I can see my workspaces, and I've got a personal workspace there that I can just, that's my personal one, I can test stuff on. And then we've got this shared one here, the future of work, that has the reports and the data sets. The data set is basically the data, the model, and then the reports are, what you're visually seeing, and then there's a thing called a dashboard. And you can access that stuff from here. So I can go into the future of work report here, click on that. There's the report, right? On the web, fully functional. That demo thing, I finished it off for us. Looks a little bit nicer. The version I finished off, we just did a quick version. But that demo is all fully working. I can come across here and I can click on bits here and they all sort of interact. All that still kind of works. I can choose the year 2020. I can do all sorts of stuff there, right? So all that's working exactly as it did in the interface, but it's working from the web. So I can do that. I can give my people a link to that Power BI service, and they get access to that. The problem is there's a lot of other stuff around there. All right, what happens if they click over here and home, and they don't know what to click on down here? What do these things mean, and so on? So we can cut it down. What we can do with a workspace is we can actually publish it to an app. All right, an app is just a web app, really. And I've done one. I've published this one. And if you want to have a look at that, we go to apps. And you can send this out to an organisation, and people can actually subscribe to apps as they update. So if I have a look at the Future Work app, there it is there. Much sort of cleaner interface. I can choose the colours and stuff like that, obviously. I've got a dashboard here for a start, sort of up front, I guess, which shows me a high-level view. And this can come from multiple reports, right? And then I've got my individual reports down here. So there's a Future of Work. And as I click on things here, I get access to all of those bits and pieces. There's that demo. And you can see it's a much cleaner interface for people to work with, and they're not getting confused by the other stuff. All right. So that's what we mean by an app. So you can publish it to an app, much easier to work with. If we're in Teams, thank you. If we're in Teams, I can go to a Teams area here, Power BI Manager Discussions, click in there, and in there it's actually just a simple matter of clicking on the plus there, add a tab, and then one of the tabs is Power BI. All right, you tell it what report you want, and there you go, Future of Work. Here's my Future Work report. Once again, fully functional, fully interactive, all within Teams. I've got my pages. My page is down the bottom here, but same principle. And there's that demo from earlier on. All right, so that's within Teams. SharePoint, shoot across to SharePoint. create a SharePoint page. I've created one here, and SharePoint uses these things called web parts in their pages. And I can click on the future work report, and there once again is that report sitting in SharePoint. And once again, all my pages are there, fully interactive and so on. All right, so it's up to your organisation how you basically distribute that information to your users. Like I said, initially it needs to go up to the Power BI service. But then once you've got it up there, you can choose to distribute it using a number of methods. And as I said, even if you've got an intranet site, you can have a page on an intranet site and have an iframe, for those who know what that means, with a full report inside it as well.
Already created and published an app, but the app in Teams as well.
That is an app in Teams there. It looks a little different.
We've already got an existing, we've got some dashboards and reports that we can push to apps, and we can just provide links to that.
Yeah.
Because we embed that in Teams.
Yes, definitely. So, yeah, basically up here, you can either, there is an option down here to add a Power BI app in here, but that provides the whole service. Within a discussion, for instance, up here, you can just click on plus, you click on Power BI.
Just find the app and I can add it to the.
Yeah, well, it's here. You can see, I can go apps, future work. There it is there. I've got two. All right, so AI examples, hit the save button, post it to the channel as well if I want. And now I've got another one up there, which is the AI examples app as well. I'll have a look at later. So pretty easy. Yeah. All right, so there we go. A quick demo on that. Forgetting to change the camera over, haven't I? All right, let's do the right thing by the online people. All right, and then finally, allowing consumers to serve themselves. I'm probably not going to go into a demo of that. If anyone wants to have a look at that, I have got a demo. I can sort of run you through that sort of stuff later on. There are a lot of ways. You saw that interactivity. There are a lot of ways we can help people or consumers to serve themselves. In terms of self-service, and we're talking about the managers and decision makers here, once the report's in place, they can interact with and change reports as they need to. They can get figures out that aren't necessarily statically sitting there. They can actually get extra information out, and they don't have to run back to the designers each time. You can also control the level of that. As the report designer, you can, if your consumers aren't that skilled in that, you can make it a little more static, a little bit less interactive, to save confusing them. But if you've got skilled consumers and you train them up, there's an awful lot they can do just by clicking on things and trying things out. Here's some of the things we can do. There's some pretty good ones, as I said, a little bit short on time to go through all the demos. But if anybody wants to see, hang back afterwards and I'll show you some of those demos. So that's the infrastructure, Power BI, right? That's kind of how it sits together. So we use the Power Query to integrate our various apps in the organisation into a nice model. That model then gets imported into the desktop, that PBIX file. We add to it using that language called DAX. We want to do that. And then we create our reports from it. We then publish our reports to the Power BI service and distribute those using integration with our internal apps. So that's sort of in a nutshell. Future of BI, just quickly. What does the future hold? Obviously, crystal ball gazing, but here's some of the things that most people agree that sort of BI is heading down this track. More collaboration for greater teamwork. That's both in terms of being able to collaborate on reports, this sort of thing where you can do comments and that sort of thing. But also designers collaborating to create reports as well, which actually Power BI does pretty well at the moment. Better integration, inbound and outbound. So better integration in terms of the types of apps that we can access and pull data from, and also outbound integration with the apps we use inside the organisation. Machine learning and AI, that's obviously a big one, and Power BI does some of that already. They're starting to work on it, but for insights and forecasting where you don't have to go and find it, it'll actually kind of try and bring it to your attention. Another one that kind of lines up with that is data productivity. Rather than you going to have to look for anomalies or look for particular things you need to work on or make changes to, having the actual Power BI system actually deliver those things to you proactively. All right, so If something dips below a certain threshold, you'll get notified, and then you can go in and see where that's happening, and you can look at ways to just what if analysis, look at ways to fix that up. Obviously, technology advancements are going to mean we can, have bigger data and faster updates and all that sort of stuff. That sort of that's a given. And database culture, I guess that's kind of the thing that's now starting to come into place. And with business intelligence comes, or with business intelligence that we can do easily within organisations, we can start to do this database or data-driven culture. And basically what it means is we're integrating the data into everyday processes, not just for the managers, but for the coalface as well, right? So they can see results, feedback immediate of what are the results of their work, and they can adjust accordingly. So we're getting much more proactive sort of workplace, I think. Quick demo of that. That's my last demo. Just out of time, but I think this is some interesting stuff here I'll just show you. So right, so I'll come back to here. All right, so I've just got a few AI examples. This is, there's a lot of, these are just some very basic examples, and I've just got a couple of them, but obviously these are changing over time, and they're things that Microsoft, for instance, are working on all the time. What we've got here is another data source. It's basically feedback, all right? So it's feedback on support tickets, all right? So how are we doing supporting an organisation? And we can see we've got scores basically, and we can see those broken down by countries there. And we've got a little map there where we can see the countries and little circles, some sort of average score based on the role within the organisation. But this thing down here on the bottom right is called a smart narrative. Basically, in terms of the report, all you do is you say, create a smart narrative. It then goes out to all your visuals on the page and tries to work out, well, what are some of the things you might be interested in seeing, all right? So now this really needs to be customised. It's something that you go in and you basically say, okay, well, it says at 173,784, UK had the biggest original score and was 1,000 whatever % higher than Spain, which is the lowest original score of that, right? That sort of stuff. You can go in here when you're doing the actual reports and putting them together, and you can customise these to sort of say, well, what are you most interested in? You know, also customise the terminology. Sometimes you'll see, it says original score. You might not want it to be called that. You might just want it to be called score, right? So you can change that sort of stuff. UK had the highest original score, followed by France, Germany and Spain. UK accounted for 51.8% original score. Probably not something that's all that useful to us. As I said, this is pretty basic at the moment, and I just threw that in there without any customisation. But once you customise it, you can start to get some actual really useful narratives out of that without having to do any extra work. So that's smart narratives. That's one of the things you can do. Another thing called key influences. All right, so same data basically. We want to look at, out of all the different, categories that we sort of keep against our data, what are the things that are influencing the rating? All right, what we've done is we've created a rating as well as a score. We've got a rating high and low. So what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, I can say high or low. All right, I've chosen low. What influences the rating to be low? Right, and I can see there that probably the biggest influencer is the role in the organisation as consumer. Right, so if I go and click on this thing here, it was clicked on there already. You can see that there's the consumer, there's the administrator role, and there's the publisher role. So they're the roles that our customers have within their organisations, and we can see that the role being the consumer is the biggest driver of low results. Well, what that's telling us is that consumers are the ones giving us the worst scores. Right? Theme. If you look at theme, right? Themes are kind of usability, security, navigation, speed. So our product, these are all different areas our product people are reporting on or giving scores on. The one that we're getting the lowest score on is usability, followed by security, which is the next one down, and so on. Company size, all right? Company size less than 5,000, much more likely to produce lower scores. Greater than 50,000 is next, and then that sort of mid-range is our best known. So once again, pretty. I mean, really, I haven't done anything to this but stick it in. All right, so there's not much else in there other than sticking that in, and obviously you can customise it to give you better information, but it's giving you some key insights. And finally, there's a thing called Q&A. All right, there are more, but I'm not going to go through them all. Q&A allows you to ask questions about your data. You can actually type questions in there that are relatively English-based, or you can have a look at some of the suggestions they've got here, and you can see average tenure for each rating. All right, it'll create that for you. All right, but it doesn't mean much, does it? So look at another one. Average tenure for each duration. All right, so it's creating visualizations for us, and we could be typing in there those things. And as I said, you do have to train it a little bit in terms of the terminology that you want to use and what different table things mean in terms of more English-speaking terms. But you can see, what are the top support tickets by duration, right? And so in terms of both AI, but also in terms of users being able to, or consumers being able to self-serve, these things are quite powerful. And if you set them up right, you can do a lot with them. So once again, that's just a couple of little demos of some of the AI that Microsoft Power BI has. There are more, and obviously they're developing all the time, and you can customise them yourself. All right, that's kind of it. Too far off the mark, hopefully. In terms of courses that we do here, we've got to do a bit of promotion here. We've got Power BI The Essentials. That's a 2-day course. We take it through the full gamut of what we talked about today, basically. So we look at creating reports, we look at using Power Query to transform data, and we look at enhancing that model with DAX, although in a simple way. We don't do too much formula stuff, but enough to be simple. So that's a 2-dayer that most people can come on and get a good rounded feel for the whole of Power BI, and then they can delve deeper into certain areas. We've got a couple of advanced courses. If you are a sucker for the DAX stuff, we've got a 2-day course on that, because doing those performance measures can get quite complex. And we also got advanced transformations, which is more advanced use of that Power Query to do more automation with the transformations of data. So they're the course offerings we've got at the moment, but we're adding more all the time. All right. A little bit over, sorry about that. What I might do is I might let people go, and then if anybody does have questions or want us to see any more of the demos or play around a bit, by all means hang back and have a chat to me. All right, thanks for paying attention, and hopefully you've learned something and learned a bit about Power BI.
Thanks.